Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. Hari ini 9 Ogos 2020. Singapura menyambut Hari Kebangsaan ke-55. Tapi buat kali pertama dalam sejarah, sambutan kali ini berlangsung dalam suasana luar biasa. Namun, membawa pengertian lebih bermakna. Pandemik COVID-19 masih mengancam. Negara mengalami kemelisitan ekonomi. Kita sedang cuba menyesuaikan diri dengan kelaziman hidup baru atau the new normal. Ramai yang bekerja dari rumah. Ada yang hilang pekerjaan. Pertumbuhan ekonomi lembab. Dan sudah pasti, kita berdepan dengan suasana politik baru. Buat pertama kali sejak tahun 1965, Parlimen mempunyai 12 orang anggota pembangkang. Dengan berbagai petanda dan perubahan yang sedang bergolak ini, dalam usia 55 tahun, mungkinkah kita sudah tiba di satu persimpangan untuk membina sebuah Singapura yang baru? Tapi apakah yang dimaksudkan dengan istilah Singapura baru dan apakah cabaran yang menanti? Untuk membincangkan persoalan ini, kami telah mengundang seorang wartawan veteran dengan lebih 40 tahun pengalaman. Beliau adalah wartawan The Straits Times dan kemudian editor akhbar The New Paper, juga mantan CEO akhbar Today, P N Balji. Selamat datang, Balji.
Terima kasih.
Dan juga bersama kami adalah Encik Abdul Rahman Said dan juga Encik Nizam Ismail, pengasas Suara Melayu Singapura. Baik, boleh kita mulakan. Balji, did you watch the parade this morning?
Yes, I did.
I watched the parade, and it was very different. And I have to be very honest that I felt moved. And Nizam disagreed with me. I felt proud and moved. Finally, we are not watching a parade, but not watching the usual predictable parade, and I could feel, for the first time, I could feel the soul and spirit of the country. How do you feel?
I feel slightly differently from Nizam, because Nizam is young blood, right? I'm much older.
I'll take that.
And I'm much older, and when you get older, Nizam, you'll realize when you reach my age, there are certain things that move you. And actually you cannot control as you get older, you cannot control your tear ducts.
You're referring to me as well, right?
I don't know about how old you are. So I was moved. Honestly, I was moved. I was on the verge of tears when I saw the tanks moving, the air show. So I was moved, and maybe what you said, Basir, is right, that it was not a spectacle, It was a bit more of a contained show. And as you get older, you don't like spectacles, right? You like you like things which are moving and slow and not too much of hype. So I kind of enjoyed it. I mean, I liked it. Yeah. Although I didn't watch the whole show, but most of it.
Nizam, did you watch the show, the parade?
Yeah, we caught parts of it. I think some parts were different, and but some parts were still the same playbook. The whole show of might. I roll out the tanks. I roll out these anti-aircraft weapons. I fly my jets over the hospitals, and it sort of reminds me that one of the responses by one of the workers was that the irony is that you're moving across these huge weapons of mass destruction over. The irony that you mobilize this to say thank you to the frontline health workers, and they've done an amazing job. And there were parts of which seems very rigid and structured. You know, I mean, there wasn't enough of the spontaneity coming across. So you get people standing stiff and waving the flags, but, you know, in a very rehearsed and very stiff manner. So I just thought that didn't quite move me as much as maybe it did for yourselves. But I think it's also a function of the kind of state that Singapore is in right now. I mean, having gone through quite a, I think when we look back at the last GE, it will come across as a very unusual and very somber set of elections. That's just my feeling.
Yeah, I see your point about the people being stiff, but that's what we are as a country. You're not going to change that. So I'm prepared to excuse that.
Rahman,
I'm slightly younger than Balji, only slightly. The thing about being old is that you also carry a lot of memories along with you. I've been involved with the National Day Parade very much throughout the 1960s. My first involvement was in 1967 in Secondary 2 as part of the Army Cadet Corps contingent. Moving on through the early 70s as part of the NCC contingent, and later on being contingent commander of the telecoms contingent for National Day Parade. I was there when the rain fell in 1968. We were drenched. But the thing that I remembered most was not so much the parade or the march past, but the route march that took us from the Padang through to Queenstown, I think. And what I remembered most was the sight of people lining the streets, crowds of them, not cheering on, but watching, and you could sense something as you march throughout the several kilometers of the march. I must confess, I've not watched the National Day Parade for, I think, something like 10 years. Much because a lot has changed. We've localized it into stadiums, into floating platforms. The people who attend have tickets, you know, to attend. And I think proportion-wise, apart from the march past, the parade of tanks and other armored paraphernalia, was what I call the show and dance, you know, the performances of the people. And I've come to feel that the National Day Parade over the last several years have been reduced to a performance rather than a parade, a commemoration of us being a nation. So
Rahman, do you feel that the parade this year should have been organized at all?
That's a question many people have been asking. Some people have argued that because of the COVID-19 pandemic, there shouldn't be a parade. I quite disagree. I think the scaled down event that we had this morning is quite appropriate. I'm not sure whether we have given too much focus on the frontline workers. I don't agree totally about fighter jets flying over hospitals, because not only are there frontline workers, but there are also sick people there who need the quiet and the rest, you know, that normally comes in the hospital.
Balji, in your article, you said that there's really nothing to celebrate. You still feel the same way.
Yeah, because I felt that that we were, I mean, the biggest crisis, right? The government calls it the crisis of a generation. And we don't even know when we are going to get out of this. You know? We don't even know, even after the vaccine is introduced, will there be a new story to say, hey, this vaccine is not really that great. You know? So in that sense, I felt that we needed and also because of the reasons, right? I gave some reasons like it's not just the effects of COVID. COVID of course is there, but the effects of COVID, like families being separated, borders being shut. I know of my friends who are separated from their families because of borders are shut, and people in hospitals, families who have lost their dear ones. So I felt for these reasons, I didn't think that it was we needed to celebrate. What is there to celebrate? So yes, I felt that way. That's the reason.
But you were moved by today's.
Yeah, I was moved. Yeah, I was moved. But if they had not held a parade, I would have thought about it, and I would have still been moved.
Nizam, any comment to that?
But yeah, I think when you wrote the article, you used very strong words that Singapore is a nation that is angry and wounded. It's a very strong imagery.
Yeah.
Then you also went on to say that you felt that the establishment was using the same old playbook.
Yeah.
That you wanted a country more than just a country of superstructures, but a nation with a soul.
Yeah.
What prompted you to come up with those?
I think the results of the way the GE 2020 was conducted, and as I said in my article, that up to nomination day, the feeling was right. I'm not sure how true that feeling is across Singapore. Even former Minister Yaacob Ibrahim told in a video interview, said that the election, that after nomination day or until nomination day, PAP was headed for was probably going to do a wipeout of the opposition. Then he said, former Minister Yaacob Ibrahim said, but as the election progressed, he could sense it in his constituency where he did walkabouts. The mood was shifting, and it was shifting so rapidly, right? And my theory is that I think there were a couple of things that the PAP did, especially how the PAP kind of attacked Raisa Khan of Workers' Party. One. And the other one also is how the party or the party leadership left Ivan Lim, one of the new candidates, let him hang dry, left him to hang dry, which I think many people were upset with. Let me just explain the Ivan Lim affair, and it contrasted with the way the leader of the Workers' Party, Pritam Singh, handled the Raisa Khan affair. He was there late at night. He held a press conference. He knew I had to do it straight away. First. Second, he stood in front and gave a statement. And after he gave a statement, he asked Raisa Khan to say something. And Raisa Khan straight away came and apologized. I think I did the wrong thing. But in the Ivan Lim affair, they, I think Heng Swee Keat, if I'm not mistaken, said Ivan Lim will respond. Right?
But Balji, can I just
Sure.
say something here? Do you think that's the only reason why the mood shifted? I'm sure there are a few other reasons that's critical. Rahman?
Like what?
Maybe Rahman.
Let me weigh in if I can.
Okay, sure. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I actually despair for Dr. Yaakov's statement that the mood changed during or after nomination day. I think it's symptomatic of him and other PAP leaders totally unaware, oblivious of what's happening on the ground, because the ground has actually been shifting for the last at least 2 to 3 years, or even longer if you take GE 2010, for example. But just over the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen a shift in attitude towards the PAP for the worse. And a lot of it is driven by circumstances impacting the people, the loss of jobs from foreign workers, the influx of new citizens. All these have weighed in on the people. There is a lot of hardship where job losses and depressed incomes are concerned. The COVID pandemic only made it worse. That given the sense of isolation, the threat of loss of jobs only made it worse. So for Dr. Yaakob to suggest that the mood changed only after nomination day, I think it's a bit misplaced.
I hope Yaakob Ibrahim will listen to this.
I hope so too.
So that's basically symptomatic of the PAP. They misread the ground again. They thought that COVID would do them a favor, but in fact it backfired.
I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. Let's say if the Raisa Khan affair had not happened, I'm not sure, that they would have done that badly. But I must also say that the way Pritam Singh, the new leader of Workers' Party, handled himself, the way James handled the debate, and you can see the difference. He was, I was telling somebody last night, it's nearly every mother would want to have him as her son-in-law. Because he was intelligent, he was cheeky, and he was not afraid of authority, but he didn't show it like, say, Chee Soon-juan showed it. Right? So I think that factor also came into play. And I think it was a great move by Pritam to get James to be on the live debate. And in a way, Vivian was just so much taken up by James.
Balji, in your article, you said we are seeing the early signs of a new Singapore emerging where citizens are not going to accept lying down the old paternalistic approach.
Yeah.
Why do you say that? Maybe Nathan would want to...
No, I say that because it is basically anecdotal. I am nowadays I have nothing better to do than go in Kepo, right? When ask people, talk to people, go to coffee shops, and I tell you, it is such a great experience. Talking to people, talking to older people too, talking to younger people, and I could feel the sense, and they were not fearful. 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, when people say something bad about the PAP, they will look behind and see, anybody or not. Then the voice gets muted. But now, no. Now, no. In fact, I gave 2 examples of my good friends in WhatsApp messages. And these were messages were kind of instigated by me. And these are 2, one is about 50 years old, the other is 50, going to be 60. And I couldn't stop them from messaging me. The anger was so vivid. And these are not people who had a sense of balance, you know. This time round, I think they lost their balance. They just felt.
I agree with Balji, and I face a similar situation with friends, professionals, normally rational people, but when it comes to politics and the PAP, I think they lose it sometimes. And I want to add on to what you said earlier about James and Pritam. I think the sentiment is more widespread than just in Aljunied, Hougang, and Sengkang. It is across the board.
Yeah.
And you can see that in the share of votes that the opposition garnered. In my own constituency in Tampines, it's PAP against the NSP. And NSP had hardly made a presence or made their presence felt during the campaigning period, except for a few posters in the marketplace. And yet, they were able to garner more than 30% of the vote share in Tampines. And I think the same situation applies also in many of the other constituencies. So, and I see that as more protest votes. People don't want to spoil their votes. People don't want to vote for the PAP. They voted for the opposition. So I think the feeling, the anger with the PAP is far more widespread than just what we could see through Pritam, Raisha, and James. You know.
Nizam, do you think these signs would lead to real change, or it's just, you know, something that happened in this election and will revert back to the old ways again?
That's a very good question. Okay, I think that just to
Because
jump in
remember 2011, there was a big swing and then it came back.
That's correct. I think there is a point of view that, you know, well, to use your words, the same playbook of the ruling party is really symptomatic of the fact that it's very hardwired into the DNA. That it's very hard to shake off the way that things are being done. So right through to the last elections we saw, some of the old playbook was still in use, in play. Unfortunately, it put a lot of people off, and that's quite telling. So I think it's, you know, the usual calls for soul searching and all that, but I really am a little bit skeptical as to whether the PAP can fundamentally alter its own DNA. I think on the flip side, I mean, now we have an official leader of the opposition, so that's a real change. Of course, it's a double-edged sword in that there are very real expectations that, you know, the role of the Workers' Party is not just to poke holes, but to suggest a viable alternative. So I think people will also want to see that happening. So it's very interesting times in terms of Singapore's political development. You know, coming back to the whole issue of, you know, whether someone is balanced or rational, I think you can't run away from agreeing, and I think this was a point that James made, and I think it resonated with a lot of Singaporeans, that you can't afford to give a blank check to the ruling party. You must have some process of checks and balance, because if you look at the way that, you know, the business world is run, corporate governance, it's all about checks and balances. And the same applies. I think the stakes are even higher when you run a country, that you really must have in place. And this was actually a point made by Tharman Shanmugaratnam himself, that he thinks there is a very strong role for good opposition in Singapore. And I think that's what a lot of Singaporeans really want to see.
Can I just add to that? I think the PAP DNA is not to give in. They will fight back, which they did in 2011. And how did they do it in 2011? Well, some of the measures that were taken. After 2011, the PM cut salaries, ministerial salaries, by I think 33%, substantial amount. Got the resignations of some ministers, including Lee Kuan Yew, Goh Chok Tong, Wong Kan Seng, Ma Bao Tan. They will do anything to make sure their power is protected. Now, one other thing about the PAP is that they have all the resources in the world. to do that. They have money, they have power, they are entrenched in our lives from birth to death, you know. How many children you should have, where you should get buried, where your ash should be thrown, specific spot. So, you know, they are so, no, seriously, they are so involved in our lives, right? So that is not easy to shake off. And they are big time fighters. I'm not sure whether the present generation of PAP leaders are like that. And that's one side of the story. The other side of the story is that the counter to that is that, do we have the 4G leaders who can fight back? I'm not so sure, you know, because of at least of what we have seen, you know, of the leadership, and it's in a way it's a leadership crisis, right? In PAP, for the first time, we don't even know who's going to be the next PM.
How serious is this crisis?
I think it's quite serious, you know? But they will want Heng Swee Keat to be the next leader. In fact, the National Day message from PAP was in Heng Swee Keat's name. So I think they will do all these things because they don't want to show that they have failed. Because PM picked him, right?
Yeah, but Balji, I think right now there's one DPM role in the cabinet, and that belongs to Heng Swee Keat.
Yeah.
And I think the message is clear. They want him to be the next PM.
Oh, they want him to be. Yeah.
But I think when you juxtapose them against his performance at the election, I mean the whole issue about winning only 53% of the votes, and also some of the gaffes that happened, right? The East Coast plan, which is now feeble. I don't know. I think they have. You're right. I agree. There's a leadership crisis. And interestingly, when the PAP did a post-mortem of the elections, they got Lawrence Wong to explain what went wrong, what could have done better, and not Heng Swee Keat. So I think I sense an internal struggle within the ruling party on who's going to be the next PM.
I agree about the possibility of an internal struggle, because it's puzzling that Heng Swee Keat was moved from Tampines at the very last minute to helm the East Coast JRC. He seemed thoroughly unprepared for the move. When he made the speech on nomination day, he was making references to an East Coast plan that at that point in time didn't exist at all. He probably was mentally prepared to deliver a speech about the Tampines plan, which was very substantial. So we don't know what happened on nomination day that had him move at the very last minute to the East Coast. I don't think it's an act of desperation to beef up the defenses at East Coast. I think there is more than meets the eye, and I think things will unfold as the years or the months
I think
go
that
by.
One event to watch out for, is party elections. The party elections has to be held this way. It's held every 2 years. The interesting backdrop to the party elections that was held in 2018. The result was leaked to Lian He Chaopao. Lian He Chaopao wrote the story before the official results were announced.
This was purposely leaked or accidentally leaked?
I think it was purposely leaked. Why? I can only speculate, right? My grandchildren are here. My grandson, sorry.
No worries.
I'm sorry. I didn't expect them to come. That's one fella.
Hello.
Hi.
That's the second fella. So anyway, I'm saying that how did Chaopao decide to run that story? Why? I can only speculate. that there was some fear. Heng Swee Keat had the most number of votes, that they may ask for a recount, right? I mean, I can only speculate. I don't know what the truth is. So this time round, the election result will show something. You know, maybe they will manage it to make sure that there is no a real challenge for first to see who has the most number of votes, then becomes the first Secretary General, right? So there are a lot of these things that are at play, you know? And so we will have to wait and see. Yeah.
Moving on, Balji, I actually went through some of the reactions to your postings in the New Singapore. Obviously, there are those who disagree with you. They say Singaporeans should be counting their blessings. The world is in crisis. Some countries, people are dying and starving. There's war, political turmoil. We are fortunate and blessed. So why are we still unhappy with the government?
Why are we sorry?
Why are we still so unhappy with the government, with the world in crisis? I mean, we are living a reasonably good life. You know? So why are we still harping and nitpicking on the
I
government?
think there are a number of factors. One, which is an issue which keeps cropping up again and again, is what I call the high ministerial salaries. And it will continue to be an albatross around the government's neck. Because a lot of people cannot accept the type of salaries they are paid. And they don't, I think generally, it's my observation, generally Singaporeans don't mind that the ministers are paid high salaries, but not all the ministers. Are they as good as they are made out to be? So I think this is one major issue. Secondly is the cost of living factor, high cost of living. Salaries have not really gone up. Salaries have not really, salaries have not really gone up to match expectations of people with the cost of living have not gone up. And I think there's a third factor, which I feel myself, especially about the older people. You have to finish. I mean, you give up your job. Retirement age is at 62, I think, and it's taking them such a long time to extend the retirement age. Why? Is it because they want to be friendly with the businesses? They don't want to impose it on the businesses? Or is it something else? No? And you retire at 62. Longevity in Singapore is 85. From 62 to 85, what do these old people do? What do I do? I just get angry, right? So I think the old age is going to get a major problem. How they're going to resolve it, I don't know. And as old people suffer, the younger ones get upset because they have to look after the parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've written an article to say that more and more older people, more families or children are settling overseas. The figure in 2019 was 217,000. And more people will go, maybe not now. Then who is there to take care of them, take care of the parents? And this is not just about money, it's also about emotional support. So I think this, and I'm sure there are more reasons.
Yeah. Raman, your view, should we be counting our blessing and feel blessed compared to the other
Well,
countries?
that's the thing. It's a question of continuous improvement. I'm sure we have a lot to be thankful for. We feel blessed with what we have today compared to what's happening in other countries. But there's always room for improvement. There's always room for a better future. We are not living in a static situation. Again, as an old man, I take this National Day as a time to reflect, to reminisce, and also to look ahead. We see how we struggle in the 60s and 70s after independence to build up this nation. The sacrifices we made, not just in material terms, but that as a whole generation we close one eye to the lack of civil rights, to our fundamental rights. Today, the young growing up in a more prosperous country would not countenance, would not accept sacrificing their basic right. They are actually questioning, they're asserting their rights. So this is really what the phenomenon is about. It's not being unhappy or ungrateful that the people are showing greater resistance to the government.
Just to jump in on that point, I think I do get a lot of this from some of my friends who are supporters or clear supporters of the establishment. But I think we're at a stage where being patriotic is about having the best interests of Singapore at heart. And having the best interests of Singapore at heart also means, in particular, having the best interests of Singaporeans at heart. And there is a distinction. How well all the economic gains that we made, how much of it actually trickles down to Singaporeans is very important. And as we live in a more sophisticated, in a very competitive world, we want to make sure that our policies are more resilient. Yeah, more well thought through. And that can only happen if there's a real meaningful, robust debate about policies as we go along. And I think we are at a stage where we need as a society to recalibrate those kind of trade-offs. This is National Day. So, as we look forward, I want to move back. And I'm actually very drawn by there was a proclamation of independence exactly 55 years ago, signed by a gentleman named Lee Kuan Yew. And in that proclamation of independence, and those are the very principles that guide the formation of Singapore, these are the words. We want to form, there's talk about, a sovereign and independent nation founded on the principles of liberty. That came first, liberty and justice. Now, how can you have liberty if any opposing or contradictory view is viewed upon with suspicion, or worse, have got all kinds of repercussions? There's no liberty. So liberty and justice came first. And then seeking the welfare and happiness of her people. Happiness and welfare. How can there be welfare and happiness if income gaps are very wide and stratified? And social mobility, particularly for minorities, is harder than for majority communities of the same socioeconomic level. And then we want to strive for a just and equal society. How can there be a just and equal society when discrimination still exists? Whether in the workplace, and it's clear that, even the TAFEP, TAFEP is, without tooth, and there's a dire need for anti-discrimination laws. And, except for the token representation of Malays in the Navy or in the Air Force, we know that there is not a clear level playing field. So how can we say that we are a just and equal society? So I want to look back at, the very principles upon which Singapore was founded and see whether we can move closer towards these principles.
Don't you think those are aspirations and not commitment?
Well, if after 55 years, you just stick it somewhere there and, you don't do anything about it, then clearly something is wrong. I think 55 years is a very long period of time.
Nizam, it's a very good point. Like going back to the Constitution and what the Constitution said, it must give a lot of us something to think about, honestly. Yeah. And next
Balji,
article I'm going to quote.
yeah. Balji, in one of your articles, you mentioned something along these lines, that Singapore needs a soulful country that treats everybody equally and with the same respect.
Yep.
What is your definition of a soulful country, Balji?
Well, a country with soul,
Yeah.
I don't think we have one.
Why not?
We have
Now?
one. Why? Because you look at all the things that have happened. So when minister after minister say that we are going to do soul searching, I don't know what that soul searching is all about. You're searching for the soul, right? If I want to put it simply, why is it not? I think we have kind of lost the plot, right? We were so much into economic development. And I think from Lee Kuan Yew downwards, they all thought that with money I can buy the people. I build Marina Bay Sands, and even today the PM, in his National Day message, repeated the same thing, right? Marina Bay, the Marina Bay area, the best downtown we have ever had. I'm not saying that we don't need that, but is that what a country is about? That's not really the soul of the country. The soul of the country is how we take care of our more disadvantaged citizens. And I don't mean that only the government. I think the people down the line should also do that. How we take care of a couple of days ago, my grandson, who is 11 years old, went to see a doctor with his father. Coming back, he spotted this bird, which was injured, I think. He told his father, please stop. Hey, look at that bird there. Some car might go over it. So they got down, found a cardboard box, put that bird in the box, and took it home. Unfortunately, the bird died the next day. I mean, I don't see that kind of kind-hearted, enough of it, kind-hearted
Kindness.
behavior.
Rahman, your definition of a soulful country?
Well, I think it was 1967 or 1968, coming from another old man. The late Astrid Rajaratnam, who was Minister of Culture at that time, and he talked about what he called the ugly Singaporean. And I think following from the ugly American, he defined the ugly Singaporean as someone who knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. And I think for a greater part of our nation's history, we went through that. We went through a relentless economic development. And somewhere along the line, as I said earlier, we sacrificed something in that process. But I'm also very hopeful that in the younger generation, we are beginning to see a of sorts of people who are, well, more soulful, if you if you wish. We see more grounds up initiatives to help the disadvantaged. I know quite a number of such groups who really go out and look for people in trouble, disadvantaged people, poor people, raise funds to help them. Where there is a national kindness movement. So I'm quite hopeful for the future that it's not the government dictating the kind of nation that we have, but it's the people themselves defining the kind of nation that should be, that Singapore should be.
Nizam?
I think having a soul is, by definition, something spontaneous. And I think it's the role of the government should really be to remove all barriers that inhibit spontaneity or any show of patriotism. And any show of patriotism could come in the form of somebody suggesting or being a loving critic. That should be looked upon as an asset, not as a liability. And really, there are many Singaporeans who want to weigh in on how they think certain policies should be realigned in light of where we are right now. And I think you should celebrate these and welcome these suggestions. So don't issue your weapon of mass destruction in the form of a POFMA directive. And the sad thing is that if you look at how it's being used at the last GE, I mean, it's vindication of all the fears that we had. Unfortunately, that there is a very strong political end to the use of POFMAs, right? So I think it's about dismantling some of these inhibitors to show of spontaneity by Singaporeans.
Do you think the fear factor is real and will go away?
Well, even as late as the last general election, I mean, we have seen the real use of political tools, right, to stifle dissent or muzzle dissent. Police reports being made, actual prosecutions taking place, and I think it's time to rethink how some of these are being used. So the fear is unfortunately still there.
It's more than just.
Sorry.
Let me.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to ask this question to Balji. Balji, after your book on the reluctant editor, were you afraid? Were you looking over your shoulders?
No. In fact, many people have asked me, no, not at all. But many people have asked me, did you get a call?
Friendly call.
I said, no, nobody called me, because what I have written, I can defend it anywhere. I had my own interpretations of events, but I can defend it anywhere. And if they did something to me, it'll be good, because my book sales will go up. So my writing of the book had a certain purpose, and the purpose was to show to Singaporeans, who many of whom believed that editors, were all just listen to Lee Kuan Yew or listen to the government. But as I have given the examples in my last chapter, and I call them the last of the Mohicans, there were editors. And when Lee Kuan Yew was at his rogue best, they were prepared sometimes to push back. Not all the time. Sometimes they pushed back and decided not to follow Lee Kuan Yew's diktat. Sometimes they gave in. So, and the people who pushed back were moved to what I call SPHS Siberia. Right?
I was there when Chong Gip Singh and Peter Lim were the editors, and you yourself at Times House. I could sense it, I could feel, and I'm surprised that all three of you are brave enough to come up front to tell the real story.
What? Sorry?
I'm surprised that the three of you are now brave enough to come up front to tell the real story.
No,
I was afraid for you guys.
No, people like Peter Lim, people like Leslie Fong. I think they were really great editors. They believed in the sanctity of journalism, at least in the Singapore context, and they fought for it. Not in a very aggressive way, but they fought for it with arguments. You know Peter Lim, right? And he's one of the most diplomatic editors you can ever get.
That's right.
But he always believed in certain principles, and he went for those principles.
Rahman, you wanted to say something just now?
No, but we don't have such editors anymore.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
I must say that. That's my last word.
No, for me, we were talking about the fear factor. Actually, it's not just fear. It's a trinity of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Three factors that I think large corporations and governments use as weapons, to gain a competitive advantage. I think the government has deployed all three of these weapons at different times, at all times, and especially during the elections. But again, as Balji mentioned, inevitably, when you push, there's also pushback. I think the people are slowly beginning to push back. You see more grounds-up initiatives. You see more petitions being, and of course, we have not really discussed the power of cyberspace, of the internet, of social media, where people aggregate and articulate their views and their grievances. And I think that in itself becomes a force that the PAP government will have to reckon with now and in the years to come.
Yeah, social media. I think this election, I think social media played a very important role.
Yes.
Although the government will disagree.
Yes.
Because they don't want to give social media that kind of
credit.
Yeah, and social media's role will only improve, will only go up, and this is something they have to deal with. They tried the off-mark trick, didn't really work, right? And it'll get worse. Yeah. So.
Okay, last question, gentlemen. So where do we go from here? What are we supposed to do to create the new Singapore, as you say?
Can Nizam ask this question? I need to go in. My battery is dying. I just need to plug it in.
Okay. Maybe Nizam first.
Okay, you caught me off guard. But I think the starting point would be to allow Singaporeans to articulate their views without any fears behind them. Coming back to the previous point, I think that is quite important. And you really need to celebrate diversity and accept differing points of view.
Hang on, I think we should wait for Balji to come back so we could.
Let me weigh in while waiting for him. I think the paradigm we've been laboring under all these years is that the government, specifically the PAP government, defines and dictates everything. I think that paradigm is shifting, especially after GE 2020. We can see that the people are slowly but surely taking control back over their lives. They are beginning to define what they think Singapore should be. And I think this is very important in our discussions. It's not just about what the PAP wants, what the PAP thinks. It's really what the people, Singaporeans, and especially the young generation, how they want to see this country evolve in the years to come. Old people like me, well, we have to slowly surrender the things of youth, as it were. But they themselves, they have their own ideas. And the ideas may not gel with our generation, but they will inherit this country, long after we are gone. So we need to see a new paradigm where the people has a voice, where the people can actually make things happen, which is very different from the last 55 years, when it is the government who wants us to go here, the government that wants us to go there.
Nizam, would you like to add on? Or we will wait for Balji?
I think some of the other issues on, particularly on social mobility and in dealing with income inequality, I think the establishment knows this. So they've been flirting with the idea of progressive wage, which if the cynics would say that how it's fundamentally different from a minimum wage model. I mean, it's just whether you want to make it across the board or applicable to certain sectors. So I think those are real issues. Where you draw the line between a very capitalistic approach towards an approach which takes care of Singaporeans better. So I think those are the real bread and butter issues that needs to be looked at.
Can I just?
So, the question is, where do we?
I heard your question.
Yeah, where do we go from here?
Yeah. I think one defining factor which has not been really talked about much, and that is today's young have option. When I mean option, they have an option outside Singapore. Right? So if they don't get what they want, they are unhappy with their life here, they will pack up and go. Right? I do this as a matter of fact. Every time I meet my friends, older people, the one question I always ask them is your children all in Singapore? Invariably, the answer is at least one, if not two, are out of Singapore. And they go for various reasons. My daughter, I have two daughters. One left Singapore 15 years ago because she was very angry with not getting into the university, into the faculty that she wanted. She was a straight A student. She wanted to go into the law faculty. Law faculty, the dean and the vice dean, they have to have an interview, right? The dean and the vice dean gave her a topic and she chose one angle. They chose the other angle. They just browbeat her into submission. She came out of that session crying. And then what did she do? She applied without telling us to the University of Toronto. She only wanted a place in the university. Letter came back. They offered her admission. They offered her a partial scholarship, which she didn't ask for. They offered her campus accommodation for 2 years. And she came and showed us this, and I told my wife, I think we have lost her. She never came back. You know what? I mean, this is what they cannot do anymore. You will just lose people, your young people, and parents will lose their children. So I think the option factor is what I think we have not considered. And we really need to look at how we treat, especially our young people. Yep.
Okay. Any last parting words, gentlemen, before we close the show?
I have no last words. I don't believe in last words.
Final say?
Go ahead, Nizam.
No, I mean, just modular Singapura.
Good one. Yeah. Appropriate for National Day.
Yeah, for me, modular Singapura, love your country. You don't have to love your government.
Yeah, good one. I just want to say that and the option, I spoke about option, right? The option is not just for young people anymore, The option is for older people like me.
Yeah, they're not so young as well like me. I left 15 years ago.
You see? So,
Yeah, I left 15 years ago.
yeah, so we have decided that we will settle down in India. We have bought a proper flat in India. We travel there very often, spend a few months there. And we may just stay there for longer periods and may not want to
I
come back.
remember you going for your long sabbatical even when I was in Times House in the 80s.
It is not sabbatical, it was a pilgrimage.
Yeah. You were long
I
leave.
went about 4 times, I think, one month,
Yeah.
1 month pilgrimage.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Why
5 months, yeah.
why India? Why do you want to settle in India?
Well, I mean, I find a connection, and it's a question that many people have asked me. And you see, India is not what you see on TV.
Mm. It's not Bollywood,
India is a few nations.
Mm.
You look at so I go to this place called Kerala, the state of Kerala,
Mm.
which is a communist state,
Mm.
which is very, very clean, which is hardly any industries because the communist government doesn't allow industries to come in. And it's a very prosperous state. And I can, when I arrive there, I can just be part of that state. And also because my wife comes from Kerala, her sisters are there. We go back every year, and I have built some very, very good friends.
Does it mean that you have lost faith in Singapore, in the new Singapore?
No, not really. I don't say I've lost faith. At this stage in my life, I want a bit of peace of mind. I don't want to spend a lot of money unnecessarily when I can get it cheaper at other places. I can get good medical care in India in the private hospitals. So why not? Attachment to family, to friends is still very strong.
Thank you again, Balji.